I'm sitting in a cafe and bookstore on Georgia Avenue in Washington, D.C. It sits across the street from Howard University. I and the countless other patrons who have spent hours and hours here know that this establishment is more than what it says in its name. In addition to selling books on the global Black experience and food, it's a film institute, a headquarters for a production and distribution company for independent films, and a film production and editing lab. But most importantly, it is a community center for Howard students and the residents of the vibrant community of Northwest D.C. Sankofa Books and Cafe and its owners, Shrikiana and Haile Gerima, embody the Asante Adinkra symbol that inspired its name, Sankofa, moving forward with knowledge of the past. From MSRC, the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, on the campus of Howard University, I am Dr. Benjamin Talton, and this is On the Yard, a podcast that uses MSRC's archival collections to shape conversation, explore stories, and uncover the ideas that drive change, and celebrate the history and culture that define the global Black experience. For this episode, I'm joined across the street from the Yard by the cafe's owner, my brother, Haile Gerima. Thank you for joining me on the Yard.
Thank you for having me, my brother.
So technically, we're across the street from the Yard, and this is unique because usually I have people come to the Yard, but you're an exception to this.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you for that honor.
It's so special. Now, I didn't do a setup where I said filmmaker. I didn't say producer. I just said Haile Gerima because I want to give you the opportunity to put the tag on your name. And how would you describe who you are?
Well, filmmaker, storyteller is the best way of describing my occupation, I think.
So storyteller first, second, third, where does storyteller fall into it?
Well, because most people do not really associate storytelling and filmmaking. To me, when you say storytelling, then it demystifies the idea of this instrument that often is associated with glamour, spectacle, entertainment, etc. But when I think for us African filmmakers, it's always good to know it's a storytelling.
That's interesting because when you first said that, I was thinking, well, how can films and filmmaking not be storytelling? But then you added that caveat where they think of it as entertainment, they think of it as a commodity, they think of it as commercial. Is that what you mean by?
And on top of that, also, is filmmaking, it brings with it a very corrupt idea of ego, centrality, flamboyance, stardom, etc. All these things, what they do is they undermine the very origin of the storyteller, which makes, to me, ordinary, regular people always have told their story, especially African people have always told their story. Now, when you make a transition into using cinema to tell your story, it keeps you from, in my view, at least, to keep thinking you're a storyteller and then you're not the first because you're doing your camera.
Yeah.
And it demystifies the ego prescription that goes along with filmmaking.
Well, you're an independent filmmaker, so it allows you to remain a storyteller. I don't know, is it really possible for those who aren't independent to not think of it as a product and a commodity, which you're saying undermines the storytelling, the centralization of storytelling in that?
You're right. That's why I think often everything we try to put in, we try to commodify into the idea, prescriptions of the industry, end up doing injustice to our stories.
I've thought of it in that way. I've had debates with people just about the commercialization of our art, Africans and people of African descent, or just art in general. And as someone who's not an artist, maybe I'm being a little snobbish. I have the convenience of not producing art. So I could say that once you commodify it, once you commercialize it, you're not making it for the art. But then I have some phenomenal artist friends who they need to eat. So they do get commissioned and they sell their art because they'll get money for it.
Well, yeah. Entertainment is an industry by itself. But I think when you think of our story as entertainment, we do injustice to it, in my view, because we have not begun to tell our story. We have been people who've been robbed our stories. Our stories have been completely undermined, dwarfed. And to reclaim our story, I don't think we can do justice to it if we keep thinking entertainment. I think our story should be just a story, and the outcome should be from its own inherent originality and genuineness instead of forced entertainment. Now, I will entertain them so they could take some of the medicine with it. To me, is a trick that doesn't do the job.
But now you were a professor. Your wife, Shrikiana, is also a producer, filmmaker. You have a business. You have not a luxury, but you have the benefit of a diverse portfolio. Not everyone can say that.
Yeah, but it's with sacrifice. Sacrifice in the sense that we had to really literally invest on our culture, oftentimes by ourselves, and not have the traditional producers come into the picture.
It could be a generational thing. We don't know how old you are. You might be my age. I'm 52. Perhaps you're 52.
I'm older than
You're
you.
older than 52?
Yeah,
okay,
I'm
maybe
older
you're somewhere
than you.
between 52 and 100,
Yeah.
you'd say? Okay.
Yeah, but I came into the movie, the time I came into the filmmaking is with a group of people who are the byproducts of the Black liberation struggle. And for us, there's nothing to entertain. Nobody asked us, Black people are in a hurry to entertain, but nobody had asked us to entertain. If we are asked to tell our story, let our story be the primary objective and not its entertainment package, because often when we think of entertainment, we try to use our culture to entertain white people. Deep down, that's the neurosis that we have not been able to dislodge.
So if you think about who you're making your work, who you're producing your work for.
Yeah.
And if you think it's for to generate wealth to produce more films, you have to have white people in mind. And
of course you have to. And not
but Tyler
even,
Perry may argue with that.
Yeah, but it's not to me, I think the issue is white filmmakers do not think like that. If you look at the output from the white filmmakers, just if you take America alone, it's a diversified. There's entertaining films, and then there's serious films.
There's the art house films, yeah.
We cannot afford. We are always expected to entertain, and we fit into that genre. Then it becomes Driving Miss Daisy.
Wow. With that in mind, today's Black cinema, is there such a thing as Black film?
Of course there is, but it sometimes morphs into being a product to continue to enrich this, what I would call the plantation owner's system. In other words, you have entertainment now is the new cash crop. It's the new cotton, the new sugar, the new indigo. In the way that you see it, it's Black entertainers that are now enriching further white capitalists.
Well, that's what I was getting at. When I say is there such thing as Black film, those that we consider Black cinema, Black films, but like as you're saying, they're produced mostly by non-Black people. And the target audience could be Black. Like Ryan Coogler would say he's making Black movies that also white people will go and see. He's proven that that's possible, as he would say. But is there really Black cinema, a robust Black cinema that is independent, telling a story, and still entertaining?
They are, but they usually are inducted into the industry. There are, even within the industry. I'm sure there are a lot of serious filmmakers. They're trying to tell their story and make their story a primacy. But it's very difficult because you're dealing with a very humongous industry that swallows its own children, much more, Black youth or Black young people.
Yeah, and I travel around, particularly I go to Ghana quite a bit, and Black TV shows, quote unquote, because we just undermine this idea of what these are. Black TV shows, Black movies are really popular there, particularly from the 90s, 2000s. You walk in there, you see Moesha. And I always tell my students, we talk about this, we're not cognizant of the ways in which we're presenting ourselves to the world. And they're consuming. I say people don't get history from people like me. Most people don't get history from historians.
Yep.
They're getting it from TV shows.
Right.
And from movies. And you understand the
entertainment
people.
has become a history source. This is why, even white history is told from Hollywood cinema. Teachers use Hollywood cinema in their in history classes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think people's popular understanding of Harriet Tubman now comes from that movie.
Yeah.
which I've been criticized for saying is not that,
Yeah, it
not
is.
that good.
It's a fact. It's
Not
a
that good.
fact. But this is the issue. The issue here is, I think, especially Black people cannot afford to be entertaining because, fundamentally, all the contradictions are from the very idea of robbed people of their story. The story is the battleground. To me, the issue of race in America and the crux of that issue is story, not being in charge of your story in the end.
As you say, it goes for sports and it goes for music.
Yeah.
When I have conversations with people, I say you really get to know people by how they dress, the food they eat, the language, and also their music. And so when you look at the consumption of African American diasporic music, popular music, it's unsettling.
Yep.
The way and that becomes who we are as a people, with the consumerism, the materialism. I know people are maybe rolling their eyes, but I truly believe this. And we celebrate them as activists. You go on this list, Jay-Z and Beyonce, wealthiest African Americans in the country, along with Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry. And they're seen as radical, revolutionaries. They're held up as leaders in the community. But they're projecting an image of us that I find highly, highly dangerous.
Well, but I think to me, when you are deprived of so many things, one of the most perverted byproduct is admiring people for living good in spite of the fact that I live bad. That's oppressed people's symptom.
Right.
Well-known symptom.
We're going to come back to that. I want to talk about the name of, would you call Sankofa your signature film?
No. For me, the society's, the response to it it's different. It has by then a different level. But to me, every movie is a staircase of my own evolution and growth. And so for me, without the short films I did that are very dear to me in the sense they are my vehicle of growth in spelling cinema, trying to put my story cinematically. So Bush Mama, I think, Ashes and Embers.
Bush Mama was your thesis?
Yeah, that was my thesis film. Then you have Ashes and Embers, a film I made after I came to Howard, 82, I think is when we shot it. Sterling Brown was shot in the same time after Winter, the documentary film. So all my films are like, for me, a staircase. None of them would happen without the earlier ones.
So Sankofa is the name of this movie. Okay, not your signature. It's the first I saw of yours. And then I saw Harvest 3000. I saw it. I was here as a student. It came out in 93. I saw it in 95. It had a long run. And there was so much buzz. I saw it here in D.C. I believe it was in Georgetown. But the name Sankofa, I was thinking, even at the time, because you were a professor across the street, here's this Ethiopian man. And this movie is, to my mind at the moment, not really about much that's Ethiopian or even the United States specifically, but the term Sankofa. And then here we are 30 years later, 10 years later, you opened a cafe called Sankofa. Why did that particular Adinkra symbol and proverb?
Well, when I was, redrafting the script, especially at a time I began to travel, very specific places I went were initially Louisiana, because I wanted to have the Catholic texture. And then, of course, South Carolina, but primarily Jamaica also became a factor.
And you filmed it in Jamaica.
Yeah, and Ghana, Jamaica. To a point, I felt especially the fact that Ghana and Jamaica began to confuse me, because apparently 84% of the people in Jamaica were brought from Ghana. This is before the turn of the century and after the turn of the century as laborers also. The Adinkra symbol was all over, especially the Sankofa bird was there in Ghana always. I liked it for its, what I began, when I researched what I was finding, I liked it in the kind of symbolism it plays with time and transactional generation, etc. But I didn't like the touristization of it to a point of downplaying its spiritual dynamics.
Absolutely.
So for years, I didn't want to name it, but I went back and forth with Sharik and talking and discussing. And finally, I settled. I said, I have to still use it in my film and co-mine my film Sankofa, because in order to go forward, one has to reclaim the past was always the best. And there's also something else added to it called craft, which is again a current idea, concept of spirit traveling back and forth from the living world into the spirit world, etc.
It's appropriate for the cafe, for me personally, because I see it as it's what they aspired to during the Black Power and Black Arts movement. It's about independent Black institutions that serve the community, and
Well,
that the community
here,
service.
of course, also the community gave us the resources to secure this place. And those who went to see the film empowered us. And we felt, both of us felt we have to build something where the community came to just discuss, interrogate history and literature and art and culture of Black people.
And this happens every Sunday. I walk in here. We got your core brothers are sitting there having their debates on Saturdays and Sundays. Mr. Bailey's out there. The students are debating. It's Howard students. It's elders in the community. It's the Ethiopian American community. It's just Black people in all their Sudanese. It's in all of their diversity are here. Upstairs you have Haile's picks, the books. Are those really your picks, or do the staff picks them and put your name on it so you can sell? Those are really your picks.
No, those are books that I read as as a student and teacher time of my life, and I wanted people to read them too.
Okay, let me read through just a couple of the titles. Maybe I'll read all the titles. I'll stop, and then you pick one of those and tell me why that's significant. Of course, you have Taste of Power, and then we have Asada, A Dying Colonialism, Frantz Fanon. We have three Fanons. A Dying Colonialism by Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth, Black Skins, White Masks, and From Columbus to Castro. You want to take any one of those?
Well, the Fanon is the critical one, because for me, I've always felt the dynamics of our politics is the challenge comes from psychoanalysis of even rebellion, because sometimes we hide in political slogans our psychological neurosis, and we don't overcome ourselves. We just want to be revolutionaries as missionaries,
right,
instead of revolutionaries who also worked on themselves to rid of contradictory upbringings and mindsets. These are very, very, very important. So for me, Fanon, even as I made my students read Pitfalls of Black Nationalism, for example, from Du Bois to him. So Fanon is a source of, for me, even in film. People do not know this, but to me, George Jackson has a lot to do with filmmaking for me. Malcolm X, his description, imaginative, ironic juxtapositions of paradoxes and all this, these are cinematic values. Had they not been engaged in the political struggle, these are people who could have been better artists than some of us who go around saying we're filmmakers.
But on the political side, we see revolutionaries and activists who, when they enter the halls of power,
be corrupt.
Yeah,
that's Elaine Brown's book, The Taste of Power.
Yeah. Of course, we can go on and on about the CBC and the ANC in South Africa, MPLA, Frelimo, and on. Okay, let's continue on. And I think these fit together. King Leopold's Ghost, I think, fits nicely with Open Veins of Latin America.
Yep.
Right.
Those are definitely, two of them are very
in conversation. Yeah. And you have Blues People, which is different.
Oh yeah, but for me, Baraka is my cultural consciousness, because when I came to America, I was completely backward, very colonized, and Baraka is my initial source of liberation as much as it is Wretched of the Earth, for example, because for me, he is one of the most revolutionary person in literature, like Don Lee or Hakim Adabudi. These people affected a lot my filmmaking planet.
And also, he had such a long career.
Yes, you're right.
So we see his changes, from a bourgeois poet in the village. Well, he started here as a student from Newark. He was a student at Howard, and most of his children attended Howard as well, including the current mayor of Newark, Ras
But
Baraka.
I think once, to me, people like him, Sterling Brown, ruined them forever, because Sterling Brown is another giant teacher at Howard that is not acknowledged well. But to me, many people, Kwame Ture, Ackland Lynch, Baraka, Toni Morrison. These people are infected by the militancy, but a very righteous militancy, or also dignified militancy of Sterling Brown. Sterling Brown is a solid person. He doesn't panic. And I feel his influence is downplayed but serious.
Mhm. Well, speaking of Stokely Carmichael, the one on the bottom shelf is Ready for the Revolution, which was his Kwame Ture's tagline. He has, to me, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 chapters on Howard, his Howard years. He's going on for the Freedom Rides, and he's doing SNCC. Those are some of the best chapters I've read on Howard during that period.
Yep.
And he went to the same high school as me in New York, Bronx High School.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's from Washington Heights. And I was in Harlem. So there's that connection. It's more than spiritual than ideological. He went from Bronx Science to Howard University. I went from Bronx Science to a school in LA and then came to Howard. But either way, I think our trajectory was along those lines. I was thinking, speaking of Howard during that period, let's talk about the yard a little bit. You arrived here in 1975.
Yeah.
You lived in LA where you were studying filmmaking since you arrived in LA in 70 from Chicago?
69. 69 summer, I was at UCLA.
And then you came to Howard in 75.
Yeah.
Let me open this.
End of 75.
End of 75.
Yeah.
So fall semester.
Yeah.
If you go to Digital Howard, anyone can see Howard's yearbooks from the first one in 1924 to when they stopped publishing just a few years ago. And they used to be really, really good. So I have the 1976 yearbook here. And School of Communication, have you seen this?
Nope.
The dean is Lionel Barrow.
Barrow, yeah.
You remember him?
Yep.
They don't have captions for these other individuals over here.
Yeah.
They look familiar?
Yeah, Abby Ford down there. But I also saw a few other people, but I don't know their name, but they were in the journalism department, per se, the others.
And if I turn the page in the 1976 yearbook, you recognize there's a young man in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I look young, man. You got to show this to my daughter.
And we don't know how old you are because we don't know how old you are now.
Yeah, my age is very mysterious because my father wrote it somewhere. It's lost because I was away, and his books were robbed by many people after he passed.
He worked for the Ministry of Education?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your mother was a teacher?
Teacher, yeah. I have no really the true age of myself.
Well, Forever Young, I'm going to just read this, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because Brother Haile is under the page Outstanding Faculty. You hadn't even been there a year. How are you outstanding faculty?
I don't bribed my students. No.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you were voted by the students. Outstanding, because it says here, Mr. Haile Gerima, who was selected an outstanding faculty by the communication students, obtained his bachelor's and master's degrees in motion picture arts at the University of California, Los Angeles. You've won numerous awards in film and playwriting, awarded a grant for the National Endowment for the Arts for his thesis, Bush Mama. Then it goes on and on to sing your praises.
I'm glad you have that picture, brother. We got to make a copy today.
Well, we have it scanned on Digital Howard. Again, you can go to Digital Howard and download all the yearbooks, but I'll get that scanned for you. Speak on that energy that was on campus when you arrived.
Well, the School of Communications was really militant at that time. The university, like Cheek,
who was president at the time.
Yeah. Had it rough when the School of Communications faculty always challenged some of the measures that were taking. In fact, Sam Yates.
I don't know Sam Yates.
Sam Yates is a revolutionary teacher. He wrote the book, The Choice.
Okay.
He was rocking Howard and predicted what we see now. He had said, Howard is contracting as it's expanding. He says it's the contraction of the tradition. The tradition was being contracted while it was expanding into many things. And so we see that now. He was really a visionary, in my view. To me, I think my whole thing with Howard was the students were primary obligations. And that had created some problems for the faculty that felt like that versus the administration.
Who the students were primary obligation for which entity?
For faculty.
For faculty.
The faculty say we should not worry about promotion, ourselves, our jobs, but the kind of pedagogic the kind of education we provide, the credibility and the quality of it, and also teaching them not to be subservient, but to be critical participants of society. That was the prevailing idea.
So 75 years here, 76. The Ethiopian Revolution is
74.
74. So you're 1 year away from that when you arrive. There's still a lot of political events going on that are pretty tragic, to put it mildly. You're immersed in this predominantly African-American diasporic space. How heavily on your mind were these events?
Well, when it was happening, I was in Ethiopia doing a film. I went to do Harvest 3,000 Years, and I was shooting it as they were literally surrounding the emperor to overthrow him. It was a very tense period. It was amazing that I completed shooting my film and got out of the country with all my originals and edited it at UCLA.
How long were you in the country?
I was there that whole summer, 74, when he was. In fact, when we hit the airport, when we hit London, is when he was overthrown, taken
away in that little buggy away from the palace.
Yeah, Volkswagen.
Was there a sense of optimism for change, or was there lament because of the fall of?
By that time, even though I had initially was part of the student idea of revolution, I was not comfortable with the military junta. It was not something I digested well. I don't like armed people to begin with in my nature. Second, the uprising was literally appropriated by the military junta.
Well, for my previous book, I did a lot of research. Actually, I spent time in Ethiopia. Not a whole lot of time.
Yeah, you told me.
But I've been had a phenomenal experience. I always thought I was going to go back every year. That's how great of a time I had. Because I just felt like every day I was reading 10 books. Not literally, but I felt as if every day is just books being poured into my head, particularly when I went to the north, to Mekelle. That was edifying. But there's a saying that I read. I don't know if it's a popular saying. Something goes along the lines of the students, if you think of revolution, the students gathered the ingredients, the unions prepared the meal, and the military ate it.
Well, that it could be said to that, but I think the students also was a very anarchistic bunch of people, because to me, I don't think they understood time and place, even though they regurgitate Lenin on the objective and subjective conditions for revolution. They thought the uprising was revolution. And they still think, some of them still who are alive, think that was revolution. For me, it was an uprising.
I also read all the debates among them. It was very fractious, which contributes to the Red Terror.
Yeah.
66 you're here, correct? So I always think of the student movement in Ethiopia as beginning around 66 with the attempted coup, and then the student movement begins. But you were involved in this. So were you involved at a?
No, not. I can say I was in the student movement during the period of study time, when the Ethiopian students in California had meetings it was all a study group. But I think there was a confusion of the study group considering itself as agents of revolution, even though they give lip service to workers and peasants. They have no idea of these entities. And in fact, this was what was very visibly recognized contradiction, that the young people did not understand the idea of peasants, especially. Predominantly, Ethiopia is not a working class country. It's industry-wise, is not that much. But the peasants were the majority of the reality. I'm not sure they understood how to galvanize the peasants, because they didn't have the language of the actual peasants.
And as I understand it, even in 71, 72, when the student movement is really getting to its peak, and these peasants, because of the famine, are pouring into these towns, and even into Addis, walking into Addis, that there was some confusion.
Very, very big confusion. The student movement, I don't think, understood the history of Ethiopia itself and the Ethiopian mindset. And even that is a regional mindset. Ethiopians, as diverse they are regionally, they also are, their mindset is diverse. And that's why from that time on, ethnic politics became gradually the kingdom of this Ethiopia that had harnessed the idea of, at least with all its contradictory symptoms, building a nation.
And even now, unfortunately, the regions are divided.
Oh, yeah. Now it's intense.
That's what you can criticize Kwame Nkrumah, first president of Ghana, for days and days and days. We can critique him. But one thing that he and his movement and his contemporaries did was to create an idea of being Ghanaian.
Yeah.
So you could be from the north, you could be from Congo.
I think even Haile Selassie, that's, I think, something we failed to see. The student movement didn't know what to see, how the kingdoms of Ethiopia, the different kingdoms, the politics, the psychological manifestation of their politics was not studied. We studied Russia, China, and England per se. I don't think we studied Ethiopia.
The history of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I want to talk about two more things. Your most recent production, Black Lions, Roman Wolves, The Children of Ottawa. Congratulations. I saw for the premiere, I think it was a DC premiere 2 weeks ago at the Lincoln Theater, not a small theater at all, and you packed the house. There's a line outside. I happened to be here the other day, and you were editing a documentary. Is that part of the same doc, or is that a new project?
There's I don't know which one when, but there's also, I'm editing right here, The Maroons of the United States, which is also one of my long-time occupation. I mean, I've been editing it for a while.
I've been hearing about it for a while. And that's your method, that you it's not to churn out film after film after film, is that you work on them for a period of time and do archival research.
These ones are very key to me and to my heart, and I'm producing them myself, so they are really, I've invested a lot in them.
Now, in terms of Sankofa, which had critical acclaim and did well, I think you spent $1 million to produce it, but it made more than that. Of course, we began by talking about the commodity side doesn't matter, but although when you want to build a cafe, you do need those the revenue. Were you surprised by the turn among the Hollywood sorts, the producers, directors, and the critics to begin to praise your work, when initially they were somewhat dismissive?
Well, no, to me, I think what was my education was the way the African-American community turned up without the institutional mediums telling them to come and see my movie. To me, that revelation for me is how powerful the Black community is. Second, how our union came about. We're independent. Sharik and me believed in the film, and we didn't want to guess and say they'll see it or not see it, but finish the film and then wait for the judgment of our community. So for me, it is, even the Washington Post, New York Times, they ignored us when we were doing well in Berlin Festival and Montreal, etc. They ignored us. They did not talk about our film. And once Black people themselves formed a committee and premiered it, and when they saw those lines in D.C. and Baltimore, then the Washington Post wrote about us again and again, New York Times, etc. So for me, I'm not surprised about the establishment always coming late, but who brought them is Black people. And I wanted young people to know, believe in your community. Your community could put you on the map of the world if you continue to struggle, to be honest with yourself.
It's always that shock that if a Black person makes a movie for and about Black people, that it will be successful and resonate in the Black. I think Melvin Van Peebles talks about that.
Yeah, well, to me, it's not even, you cannot predict. I think you should say, I'll tell a story that I'm hungered by.
Sure.
One. The first one is this story a telegram for people or for you also?
Right.
If it's nutritious to you, people will find it in that fashion. Then that's when it clicks.
It was phenomenal the way people had to see it. It was a cultural phenomenon of the moment. Like Daughters of the Dust was similar. You had to see Daughters of the Dust. You weren't conscious if you didn't see Daughters of the Dust. And the Sankofa School Days had that energy around it as well. It's a movie that everyone had to see. I don't know if School Days was totally independently produced, but he certainly had to do a lot of fundraising and pitching for it.
No, School Days is industry produced, but she's got to have it. I think
she's got to have it.
His, yeah.
All right, Black Lions, Roman Wolves, The Children of Ottawa. Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
This is it's one documentary, but it's in 5 pieces.
In 5 parts.
5 parts.
Yeah.
I saw it and I was deeply moved because I've studied the third Italian attempt to conquer Ethiopia, the previous time in 1896, they were legendarily defeated by Menelik, and they suffered trauma.
Yeah.
The whole country suffered trauma.
That's my attempt in the film is to show this is not just a colonial endeavor. The whole generation grew up tortured by the defeat and shame. That's what I want to make sure, because a lot of people do not know that this history.
The Ethiopians defeating the Italians at the Battle of Adwa.
Yeah, that Adwa, and the children that grew up with the shame of that defeat made the Italian fascism rise up. This is a claim, like literally retrieving the historical interpretation that as if like accidentally the Italians just came again. No, this is a built on oven. The people were and that's what also makes the atrocity formidably factor. Otherwise, it just, Second World War is began in Poland when Hitler comes. No, for Ethiopians, the ushering of Second World War is us, and we never claimed it in this vociferous way.
I also see trauma on the Ethiopian side.
Yeah.
And toward the middle of the movie. First, in the beginning, it's the invasion comes and we're rallying. Or even peasants with sticks are rallying, and we see the men on horses and even women being galvanized. But in the end, it's the shock of we've been defeated.
Yeah, because Ethiopians lived off of Adwa confidently. That's why the guy was saying in the film, except few of us who knew the armed discrepancy, most people felt they'll do the same thing they did at Adwa, like their ancestors, period. That itself was like a rude awakening on the part of Ethiopia.
It's the Ethiopian exceptionalism that goes back even to Christianity in the 4th century.
Yep.
Ethiopians are unique, exceptional. And that, in fact, before the 1900 Pan-African Congress, when they're going to meet with Du Bois and co., they approached Menelik to say, would you be honorary chair of this Pan-Negro conference? And he said, it may be apocryphal, but he's reported to have said, you're mistaken. I'll support your conference, but you're mistaken. I'm not a Negro.
I don't know if he said that.
The idea being that he has not suffered under colonialism.
Yeah, but that could be the truth, because he's very aware of slavery. I think because there was an African American brother who went to Ethiopia and informed him profoundly to a point. He said, "Okay, bring them here."
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I like that version.
That's Ellis Brown, who came to Ethiopia. In fact, he's the cause of the Ethiopian-American diplomatic relationship, Ellis Brown. But he's not known in history because he was a black man who came out of slavery from San Antonio, Texas, went to Ethiopia straight.
I didn't know I read about that.
He's
Yes,
an amazing
I did. Yes,
guy.
I did know about
His
that.
story is not told
Yes,
well.
I did see a snippet of that.
Yeah.
What is more well known is the African American response to this invasion in the 1930s.
Yeah, that's where, you're right.
And I love the way you used, and we always celebrate the partnership between Sankofa and the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, how you centered the black press
Yep.
in the film.
Yeah. The fact African Americans fought on our behalf is something I want Ethiopians to know, because that's what also touched me. When I came to America and I realized getting this story rarely leaking at me, coming in bits and, thing here and there, I said, damn, black folks in America are just very internationalist.
And covering it in the black press and
Yeah.
trying to go to Ethiopia. In fact, there's a law passed by Congress to prevent them from going to
there,
Ethiopia. So
including sending arms. They stopped them.
airplanes.
Yep.
And one of the pilots was an African American, I
Yep.
believe from
Yep.
Tuskegee.
Yep.
To the extent that when they passed this law, African Americans then say, well, Spain ain't Ethiopia, but it'll do because we'll fight the fascists in Spain if we can't fight them in Italy. So we have groups joining the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. So I love the way you situate the black press
Thank
in
you.
there and the way you bring that into the narrative. And I'm proud of the fact that Moorland-Spingarn was able to.
Thank you.
Able to-
And
so-
thank you again.
Oh, of course. So we're in Sankofa Cafe. I want to talk about your sandwiches.
Named after African American filmmakers.
And Usman Sembène as well. We have Julie Dash, Larry Clark, Charles Barnett, Ava DuVernay, Kathleen Collins, Usman Samben, Spike Lee made the cut.
Yep.
Billy Woodbury, Raoul Peck.
Yep. You have also Med Hondo, who is a Mauritanian filmmaker. You have Safi Faye, a Senegalese woman filmmaker. So it's Pan-African.
And it's Pan-Africanism as this cafe is Pan-African, as your film is. Going back to this to show that we teach the story, write the story as if it was Africans fighting for independence, Ethiopians fighting against imperialism, African-Americans fighting for civil rights. But really, if you think of it as one struggle with different fronts, that's how King thought about it. That's how Nkrumah thought about it. Truly Pan-African.
Yep.
As are you, my brother.
Yes, my brother. Thank you.
I appreciate you for joining me on The Yard.
Thank you, Thank you, my brother.
Thank you for joining us on The Yard, the podcast of the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, a University FM production, and produced by MSRC's very own Aaron Jacobs. I am Dr. Benjamin Talton. We look forward to seeing you again on The Yard.